You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, my guest is someone who is going to help us understand a little bit about personal storytelling. More importantly, identifying your stories so that you can attract the right clients and the right people around you. Her name is Leslie Fiorenzo. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Doug. I'm excited to be here.
As am I. I'm glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration for you to get into this realm of helping others learn how to be better speakers and identify their own story.
Well, public speaking, you probably know, is the number one fear in the world. And if this is a line stolen from Jerry Seinfeld, but if you were asked to do a eulogy, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy, most of us.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when we're in business leadership, we have to be able to captivate our audience. We've got to be able to share our message in a clear, powerful way that makes people ask the question, oh, I want to learn more, or I'd like to have a conversation with this person, or that sounds really interesting. Most of the time, people fail to do that. And I feel like that's my mission, is to help my clients tell their story in a powerful way that attracts their right fit. I'm sure you would agree with me, Doug. We're not right for everyone. We've got to find our tribe, so to speak. And I see so many business owners make that mistake, especially when they're out networking. Well, I'm a full service this, or I can work with anybody. No, you're going to work with people who can pay you, number one. And number two, you've got to find the people that resonate with you, because you're not right for everybody.
Totally true. Couldn't agree more. And much of the business coaching, particularly for the sole proprietor type entrepreneurs who are trying to build a business, there's a lot of encouragement to identify your niche and really lean into it, hit it hard and heavy. And there's another old saying, the man who chases two rabbits catches neither. And I think that applies in many ways here. And I say all that being an admitted schizophrenic about business things. I've got about 4 different things I do, and clients in each of those realms seem to think it's going pretty well. So I'm always eager and willing to do that, and kind of continue to evolve my own practice as things, as markets change and opportunities come up. But let's get back to the idea of, have you spent any time trying to help people understand why public speaking is such a fear factor?
Yes. Well, we're born with 2 fears, Doug. The fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Everything else is learned. And it probably was a well-intended adult in your life that told you to sit down and be quiet. And so you learned from that, or you are telling yourself a false story that this is somehow scary, or I'm somehow not good enough, or this doesn't work for me, it works for others. And so we need to get rid of that story. I work with my clients to do what I call change your inner critic to your inner champion. Because we all have a critic, and its job is to keep it safe. We just keep us safe. We just need to change how it's doing its job.
Well, I agree with you that early childhood programming can have such a tremendous impact on the story, the reel that streams in our brain. Mm-hmm. And there is that inevitable pause when you realize you've been asked to take the podium and get up on a stage, however small it may be. As an example, I do a lot of work with individuals who want to become entrepreneurs by buying businesses. So there's a tendency when someone pursues that pathway, there's a tendency to really get deep in the numbers. You're analyzing the business you've targeted, you're negotiating the deal. But I am an advocate of think about the people you're going to inherit when you buy that business. You're buying it because it is a profitable going concern. The owner founder maybe is of a retirement age and is wanting to exit and move on. But there is a team that already exists. And on day one, if not sooner, you're going to have to be standing in front of that team one way or another and saying, ta-da, here I am. Look at me. And you've got to have a story to tell about why you wanted to buy the business, what you're thinking about. And that often proves to be one of the hardest parts of the whole journey.
It does. And I've seen so many happen throughout my career when the new management comes in and people were really aligned with the former owner. Unless they take specific steps to align people with them, it's going to be rocky and it's going to be hard. And valuable people may exit that organization. You lose a lot of company history, of organizational history when that happens.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn to this idea of crafting your own personal story. Where does that enter into the game here, Leslie?
Well, I encourage my clients to think about your story as something you can use as a brief 30 to 60 second intro when you attend a networking event or introduce yourself someplace, to maybe a 20, 30, even 40-minute pitch, quite possibly to an investor. Certainly in the case you just described, meeting with new employees and engaging people in a way that they become curious, want to learn more, but really want to partner with you in whatever way that is. So maybe it's a client that you're going to engage with, or maybe it's an employee that you want to be on your side and doing the work for you that you need to lead them in.
Well, I know a lot has been written lately in the last couple of years. Dan Miller made a famous pitch about story brand
Yes.
for product offering, at the company level, explaining who and what your product is, that you're not the hero of the story, your customer is the hero. And you as a provider are only a guide and an assist along that way so that the real hero can win the day. And again, that does play well on a storyboard. But again, I'll ask why. Why do you think people struggle with even trying to craft their version of a story about who they are and what they believe in?
Well, sometimes we've been told if we toot our own horn, that's bragging. And we don't want to be braggadocious. We don't want to be that person that is, look at me, which social media does all the time for us. And I won't go down that path right now. But I think the important part for people to realize is, unless people understand what drives you and what moves you forward, it's going to be hard to make a connection. One of my recent clients, we just had this conversation in our last session about what she does, and her business is a little different, but the fact that people want to say, wow, tell me more, when she puts work out on social media or in a live session. And so coming from that perspective is, I always encourage my clients, after you make a statement or you're talking in a paragraph or whatever it is, ask the question, so what? Who cares? And if the answer is, I'm not sure, then maybe we have to go back to the drawing board. But I believe, Doug, people want to relate to people who are real and authentic. They don't want a varnished form, a perfect form of somebody. They want to connect on another human to human level.
I agree with you, and it's so very critical. And as you were describing that, I'm thinking back on the chapter in my life when I was running a nonprofit helping job seekers, and one of the things we probably struggled with the most is helping people tell a story, a personal story, and turn their thinking to the fact that they were going to be a brand in the market. If they wanted a new job, they needed to use some of that brand thinking of why me, why, why not, and so what. And one of the methods we used, we encouraged people to take a little stroll down their own memory lane and list accomplishments that they had achieved, not job titles, not the job description elements, but actual accomplishments. And it was hard. I mean, people, you could see them sitting there in pen and paper, and they were just blank. It was writer's block. It was like whatever. And the analogy I used back then at that time, Tiger Woods was at the peak of his golf game before all his other demise. And I said, for Tiger to claim that he can hit a tee shot, 380 yards, in his book, that's no big deal. That's what he's supposed to do. In his mind, the question is, did it land in a spot 1 foot to the left or 1 foot to the right of where I meant it to go? And, me as a golf hack, 380's out of the question, never going to have that happen. But if I went 280, I would be wildly ecstatic. And I could be 50 yards left or right. And as long as it was out there, I was happy, And so his definition of accomplishment versus mine was quite a bit different. But the point is, either one had value depending on the market we were playing in. And I encourage people to think about it that way. You might not think your accomplishment is that great and that special and that wonderful, but somebody that wants to hear your story is going to look at that and go, oh, maybe I do need to know more. Tell me more about that. I am curious.
Yes, that's a great story. I love that analogy.
So as you start working with people, where do you fundamentally begin with a new client?
Well, we begin with the story that's holding them back, because most people come to me with some level of fear about putting themselves out there. And many of my clients are good. I'm great one-to-one. I can talk to one person at a time, but I don't want to talk to three. I don't want to talk to a half a dozen. And you put me in front of a room of 20 and I'm terrified. So we have to get over that fear. You talked about the business owner that buys that business and needs to get in front of that group of employees. It might be 5 people, but it might be 50, or it might be a couple hundred. They've got to be able to share their story in a clear, compelling way without filler words and with body language that is interesting and makes people think, hey, I really want to get to know this person. This sounds like a great opportunity. I'm excited about this, as opposed to, oh my gosh, that's the new owner, or, ooh, I don't know if I'd want to work with them or do business with them. Or we want to be able to share with people what we do and why we do it. Simon Sinek says people buy the why of what you do, not the how or the what, but the why. So that why is really important.
Well, and to take it to a whole other level, there's a popular premise that people do business with other people they know, like, and trust. And you have to go through, if you're a provider or if you're building a new relationship, you have to pursue that know, like, and trust. And it's one thing to say, hi, I'm Doug, here's my story. Well, okay, now they know me. And but do they like me? How do I do that? And what do I do with that? And then, whoa, we got to get to trust. Oh man, how do I get that going on?
Well, there's a data point that would suggest 10% of any group isn't going to like you. Okay, so what? I worked with a coach who coached me one time, and his mantra was, "So what? Who's next?" And so that thinking about that yeah, I'm not, because we all have met professional people in our lives or other people in our lives who we just didn't click with. And so we've just got to move on from that. But the trust factor, I think, starts by keeping your word, doing what you say you're going to do, especially with yourself. We break promises to ourselves so easily, but for sure that other person. And if something happens that you can't, then you need to follow up and let them know. Don't just leave them in the dark. Don't, what's the term now? Ghosting. Please avoid ghosting people.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with that, live up to your word. But the other element that I see a lot when I do leadership coaching is the whole idea of being authentic. Because people now, for whatever reason, most everybody out in the modern world, their BS meters are really good. They're really tuned in. And a simple statement that sounds like a lie or a mistruth or a twist or a fabrication, that meter goes off and all the needles are bouncing back and forth. And people go the other way. They're definitely not going to move toward trust when that BS meter goes off.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is what happens a lot on social media, is people are putting things out there and I'm like, really? That, no, and just move on. So being authentic, true to your word, and sharing with people what motivates you. Just said it a minute ago, your why, and telling people where you came from and how you've arrived at this point without fabrication. I mean, don't make it up. Tell us the truth. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the speaker said, I don't have necessarily a rags to riches story. I had a pretty good childhood. I didn't never have anything terrible happen to me. But he went on to say what he had learned and a few other things. And he was just being honest. And I think that honesty leads to trust.
Yeah. Well, and I go back to the example of a person coming essentially out of the clear blue and buying a company. The story that I encourage them to tell, and this is not fabricating things, but it's a framework, and that is, hey, folks, I found this business. I studied this business. I like this business. I'm a private investor. I want to own this business. And I am now going to ask you to join me, and let's keep this thing going. You've accomplished great things. You've been here 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Let's keep this thing going. Because I'm a private investor, I don't have a compelling reason to blow things up and change things. I want to figure out how we can perpetuate. Might we eventually look to opportunities to grow and expand? Yeah, I think we've got a great foundation for doing that. But are we going to do it tomorrow? No. You're going to teach me how you do what you do, and I will be here to, support that and keep this thing going.
That's great advice. I've seen too many times people who do the exact opposite.
Yeah. Well, and in the merger and acquisition space, private equity and venture capitalists are famous for coming in, and I mean, they've written movies about it. They come in and blow things up and restructure and chop things off. And the good news with this entrepreneur through acquisition is those guys are just that. They're private individual investors that are hungry to leave perhaps their own corporate jobs and go into the world of entrepreneurship. There's no better way to do it right now than just finding a pre-existing business that's already cash flowing. You avoid all the startup pain, and you find a willing seller who, like I said, is generally a baby boomerish type and is ready to retire and move on. So it's a perfect storm right now out in the business world.
Yes. Yeah. And I think those people who have been in that organization want someone to come in and assure them that I'm going to take this forward. We're in this together. And maybe I don't know the history here, but I did study the company, as you indicated. It's a viable concern, and I'm super excited to move this forward. I need you on my team.
So, Leslie, I'm going to go back to the basic premise here, the whole idea of structuring a public speaking presentation. Do you have any sort of framework or template you encourage people to think about?
Start with the end in mind. What do you want people to believe or feel differently at the end of your presentation than they do now? And then let's backwards plan how we're going to get there. There's, I think, two really important pieces to your presentation, and that is your opening line and your closing line. Is you have to be able to captivate your audience from the start and engage with them at the very beginning, and then wrap it up with a bow. People don't remember so much about what happens in the middle, but they're going to remember your opening and your closing, and they're going to remember how you made them feel. So let's talk about how you want them to feel. What do you want them to do as a result of listening to you? And how do we construct that presentation to get that end result?
What I have seen a lot of people fall into is a trap about filling their content with a lot of technical details about whatever the subject matter may be or the immediate challenge may be, and they kind of lose everybody in it. It's kind of the proverbial turn on the fire hose. Now that I'm up here and now that I've got your attention. And I think partly maybe it's driven by that defense mechanism of like, if I don't show them how smart I am, I'm going to get found out. And honestly, quite opposite is true. It's simple. It can be elegant when you're trying to get somebody's attention and create a message. And you can leave all of the technical detail for follow-up meetings and project planning and workshopping and all those other things. But the primary message just needs to be real simple. And I had one coach tell me, back to the job seeking world, one of the advisors that participated and helped coach our program said to everybody, if the fifth grade girl next door doesn't understand what you do for a job, you've overcomplicated it.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that. Or if you could tell it so your grandmother could understand it.
Yeah.
No disrespect meant to grandmothers anywhere in the world. But, really, that kiss, keep it sweet and simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I tell my clients never make a point. So use data without a story, and never tell a story without a point. So that was a mistake I made early on. Somebody said, tell stories. So I told stories that didn't relate to anything, but they were good stories. Got a laugh. Didn't do any good.
Yeah. It didn't support the message that was trying to be delivered. Well, what is there a practice discipline people can follow?
I'm not sure I'm clear on your question.
If somebody struggles with this idea of doing public speaking or standing up and telling their story, is there is there something they can do to practice to get ready and be more comfortable doing it?
So scheduling a Zoom call with yourself and just turning on the mic and the camera and practicing, or just using your cell phone. Most cell phones have a video recording piece, most smartphones, I should say. Find a friend, practice in front of a make-believe audience. So if you have small children at home and they have toys or dolls or something, you can use all their stuffed animals, set them up in a circle, practice in front of that. You can practice in front of the mirror, but the point is practice, because the more we do something, and are you going to hit it out of the park at first? No, that's pretty rare. The first time you rode a bike, did you ride it perfectly? Probably not. Probably
Right.
scraped yourself. No parent, Doug, no parent would ever tell a child who's learning to walk, oh, kid, you're never going to do it. Sit down. Give it up. Well, why do we tell ourselves that anytime we're trying something new? Oh, it didn't work that time. Well, it didn't work twice. Practice. Not for perfection, but for progress.
I love that. Not for perfection, but for progress. I like that. May borrow that.
Yeah, sure. I don't think I made it up. I think I got it from somebody else. Because too many people give up because they're not excellent right out of the chute. Well, we can't be excellent. You're going to make a boo-boo. There's going to be a word that creeps in that you didn't want. No one knows what you're going to say from the very beginning. No one can read. Mind reading is not a thing yet. I don't know that it will ever be. Hopefully not. Anyhow, know that if you made a mistake or you said something that maybe you didn't intend to, oh well. And if you forget your point, I've had lapses of memory occasionally. Acknowledge it, and it'll come back to you. Just relax. I think having a breathing practice that you can do when you're caught up in a moment that seems a little stressful or in your head, and that critic is saying, no, no, no. You can just stop and breathe deeply, breathe into your belly and regroup yourself.
If for some reason, as you were describing that, I was reminded of an experience I had many years ago as a young man. I was asked to give a presentation at my church, and my church was a good sized one. It was not uncommon to have like 2,000 people in the congregation on any given Sunday. But I was asked to stand up and speak, and for me, coming from the military and such, I was pretty good with public speaking, but something about standing up at the podium at church, that was a whole new pressure point for me. And our associate pastor saw me in the backstage, and he could tell I was a little nervous. He said, Doug, I've got a secret. You want to know my secret for standing out there? And I said, sure. And he said, I've got a simple little prayer I say every time I have to go give a sermon. I say, Lord, I've got this outline, but don't let that stop you.
Love it. That's great. That's great.
And I went, wow. And I've used that. And even in a more secular realm, I've used that. I am a man of faith. And so I say that little prayer. Okay, Lord, you've ordained this moment. I'm supposed to go speak to these people. I've got an agenda, but don't let that get in the way of what I really need to say. And it works pretty darn well, I must say.
I'm gonna copy that, because that's amazing. Because I believe that if you put yourself in front of a room full of your ideal clients or potential clients, the people that are going to connect with you, and the right ones will hear your message. And not everybody's right. I mean, we couldn't possibly work with all the people on the planet. There's not enough hours in the day. It's just way too big. So hone in your message, and it will land with the people it's supposed to land with.
I love it. Leslie, I think that's a great point to wrap this up. I always like to ask my guests to share how folks can get a hold of you directly if they're interested in knowing more about your work.
Yeah, they can find me at lesliefiorenzo.com. That's my website. And they can book a call with me if they want a free, no obligation conversation about what they're doing and see if I can help in some way. I also have a blueprint free offer they can download. Fearless Speaking Blueprint, that's the name of it. So it's 5 points to help them overcome their fears, if that's a thing, and get their story out there. Because I believe if you have it in your heart to serve other people in a business way, an entrepreneur, small business owner, buying a business, whatever it is, that was put there for a reason, and you need to pay attention. I heard Les Brown tell a story the other day, and it was not his original idea, but he read it from somebody. But imagine yourself on your deathbed and all of the ideas that you were given that you never put into place are standing there looking at you saying, you did not give us life, and now we're going to die with you. Don't let that be you, right? Put your best foot forward. It's tough, yes, but it is worth it.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you again, Leslie, for sitting in. And folks, all of those links we will have in our show notes, as we always do. And if you're listening on your favorite streaming service, I do want to remind you, we've got a YouTube video version of this show called Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over to YouTube and just check the archives, take a look and see what else maybe you've missed up to this point. Also, would love to hear from you. If you've got an idea for another show, a guest, or a topic you'd like to hear, drop me a line, let me know. We would love to serve in that fashion. But with that, we're going to sign off, say goodbye, go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.